Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Straight On Till Morning. Wendy among the pirates. As might have guessed from the preceding pages, Wendy hadn't much experience interacting from the world at large. That is, people who weren't her family, shopkeepers, neighbors, or other audience members at the theater. Yet, despite this innocence, she had immediately sensed that perhaps these pirates were not the nicest people to be left alone with. It was one thing to tell tales of swashbuckling battles and the backstory behind the bosun with the eye patch, and quite another to actually be in their mindset. Captain Hook presented his men with a flourish. They stood neither in neat rows nor at attention, with very little respect at all, actually, and beheld Wendy far too boldly for her liking. One skinny chap with large gold earrings who slouched provocatively to one side actually gave her an appalling wink. Their clothes were not the bright primary colors of nursery room imagination. They were salt-faded and dull. Their faces weren't merely unshorn and artificially streaked with dab of tar. They were grubby. All shades of skin were dulled with not enough washing. Wendy found her hands twitching to urge a grab a cloth and scrub them almost overwhelmingly with all of her thoughts. Men, this is Wendy, darling. Wendy, this is me, Crew. She is a guest aboard the Jolly Roger, and I expect you swaps to treat her as such. It's bad luck to have a woman aboard, one large old pirate with a red bandana growled. Worse than that, brings storms and swells. Oh, I think it's the best sort of luck to have a lass on deck. A man with one eye and a loathsome leer grinned at her disgustingly. If any one of you touches her, Captain Hook said with a false smile, you'll be feeding to the sharks before you can draw your next breath. He leaned on his heels and put his hands on his hips, a movement that threw his splendid jacket back and revealed the twin pistols that were holstered elegantly on his hips. This made Wendy feel a lot calmer but a little vexed. What if the pirate was saving her life or wanted to arm wrestle? What then? This whole thing is a bloody waste of time, a third pirate scoffed. We should be attacking ships, looting gold, and plundering treasure. And so we shall, but in the meantime she has given me something more valuable than all the gold in Neverland, Hook said airily. Peter Pan's shadow. He unfurled the poor limpid thing and flapped it out to show them. The shadow hung limply from its neck where the pirate held it, struggling only a little. The pirates looked most unhappy at the sight, a smidgen angry, and not just a little uncomfortable. Seeing a shadow hanging there apart from its owner was unnatural, might make the heartiest and blackest soul shiver. But even Wendy could see there was more to it than that. What will that get us? Demanded an orange-haired lout with a northern European accent. Why, it would get us... Hook paused with a not very subtle side at Wendy. It will get us something we've always wanted. Something I've always wanted. And I'm your captain. So it's what you want, or at least your best interest to do it. And when I have it, we will be done with Neverland and all its silliness forever. There will be plundering and looting from here on out, all right? There were mutters of grumbles of grudging assent. For now, I'm putting the shadow of safekeeping in the trusted hands of Mr. Smee. At this, the pirates looked even more uncomfortable and disgusted, possibly resigned. They threw up their hands and slowly dispersed, growling, unsatisfied with muttering curses. So there you are, my dear, Captain Hook said, bowing to her. A loathsome lot, to be sure. But you're safe among them while you're on our way to Neverland. What time will you get there, if you please? Wendy asked politely. We don't deal with time or clocks or watches on the Jolly Roger, Miss Darling, except for the figuring latitude and longitude. Pirates are free from such civilizing constraints and demonic inventions of man. We have none of those infernal contraptions on this ship, so I can tell you. Wendy narrowed her eyes. What a strange thing to say. And there was a strange look behind his bluster. Fear? Could it have possibly been fear? He was afraid of something he wasn't telling her. All right, well, approximately how long will it take to get there? Surely pirates aren't entirely free from the passage of time. what with meals and sleep and the like. Oh, you're a clever girl, aren't you, Miss Darling? Well, these things aren't precise, but it should be more than a day or so. And how are we getting there? Captain Hook gave her a knowing smile. I suppose if you repeated his hand, he would say something like, "Ooh, second star on the left, etc., etc." And you would fly through the sky straight to the island of your dreams. Alas, my lady, pixie dust and good magic are rather out of a pirate's reach. You have to go to a different route. It nearly cost Major Thomas his life. Possibly his soul. It was a little unclear. Anyways, he's a useless lubber and prone to grog. Not much of a loss there. Wendy's eyes widened, and her hand went to her mouth to dismay, but Hook was already touching his hat to her and spinning away, chuckling over the shadow he held. Now alone, she looked around the deck nervously. There was no benches or chase lounges as a proper transport vessel. Because of the lateness or the earliness of the hour, the pirates mostly went below decks to their bunks. None of the remaining seemed particularly happy about the strange motion of the ship, gliding along without oars or sails or any human help at all. They occupied themselves with other piratey pursuits, five-finger fillet on an upturned barrel, surreptitious sips from leather flasks, shouting over a game that involved rolling with what looked like very much knuckle bones instead of dice. And how were those come by? Wendy wondered. She fidgeted with her fingers a bit in the way she did at parties, and then decided that the dice throws seemed the least dangerous. My, those are certainly unique implements you're playing with, she ventured. The pirates just grunted. Of course, I don't approve of gambling at all, but Father has a lovely pair of dice that he keeps in his jewelry. They're not bones, at least I don't think so. I believe they're ivory, although I suppose it's basically a sort of bone, isn't it? The pirates frowned and just ignored her. They have real pips on them, carved and painted. They're quite lovely. Of course, I am against gambling, and so is Mother. It's not proper occupation for everyone, even men. But his dice are quite pretty and nice to behold, and they warm up in your hand. And how do you know which side your land's on without pips? The pirates stopped their game entirely and stared at her in exasperation. Well, I've never played before, she said a little defensively. I'm not asking you to teach me, I'm just wondering. I should have to say no if you asked me, wouldn't I? Seeing as gambling and games of chance are immoral. So please, I'd rather you didn't ask. Weren't going to, one of the pirates grumbled. And with that, he swept the dice up in his bag and left her alone with the other player, who gave her nasty looks before they, too, retreated. Wendy wilted. Life aboard the pirate ship was actually surprisingly similar to a fancy party, the type she hated. With dressed-up girls and boys and men, and tea and tiny sandwiches and aspic and someone throwing off the piano. No one to talk to her at those gatherings. It was like Christmas all over again. She wandered forlornly across the deck and looked over the railing. The sky was blank. Fog surrounded the ship, and there was no more breeze. It was as if they had reached the middle of the night, the middle of nowhere. Everything stood still except for a few tendrils of Wendy's hair and the black flag. She shivered, pulling her coat more closely around her. She didn't want to be alone, but the five-finger fillet players looked dangerous. And then Wendy saw salvation. A lone pirate was sitting cross-legged on the deck, looking squinty-eyed and studious, pulling a string on his pants. He was sewing. Wendy brightened like the sun. Now there was a subject she could feel confident about. She walked up to the fellow and watched for a moment as he ineffectually stabbed a giant needle into a piece of cloth that he had held awkwardly in place on his own pants, trying to cover a hole. Excuse me, if you don't mind me saying, but I'm afraid you're doing it entirely wrong, Wendy said politely. The pirate looked up at her, one eye still squinted. She wondered if it was permanent affliction. Well, I ain't got me a seamstress to fix up my fancy pants now, do I? He cackled. What mother can't do, sons must makes do, as they say. Oh, I don't know about that, Wendy said, trying to work out the words in her head and failing. But if you hand it to me, I'll have a go. The pirate's eyes widened. Without a second thought, he shoved the whole mess to her, including his pants, which, as brightly striped knickers attested, he had apparently not been wearing. "Oh," Wendy said, blushing to turn around. The pirate cackled. "What, you must think I'd stick a needle while it was in me own skin? I'm unskilled, not daft, you silly cove. Now, settle down. You can't see me privates or me bum, and then there's them that wears less on washing day around here, so you better get used to it." "Well," Wendy tried to rearrange her shocked expression while busy sorting herself around the mess of cloth. He was right, of course. She was in alien country now, a ship full of uncivilized men. All she could do was act properly, like a decent civilized person, as there was no guarantee that others would. She settled herself down on a tip-over quarter cast and smoothed out the pieces. Actually, the pirate had made a very nice, neat little knot to begin with. That made sense, she supposed. Sailors had to be very good knots, hadn't they? She bet they would be excellent at macrame, or even crochet, if patiently taught. Wendy whistled and hummed to herself and felt much better with something familiar with. In a short while, the patch was finished and held tightly on tiny and neat little stitches. "They're all done. You can see how Oh." There was a crowd around her now, pirates, speechless and wide-eyed to a man. "Blimey, do me next," one said, who whipped off his shirt. "No, not me. I got no seat in me trousers," another one begged. "No, me next," whined a third. All right. She put her hands on her hips, feeling crowded and overwhelmed. It was on the tip of her tongue to say that as long as she was on board, she would do any minor repairs and mending that they needed. Might as well make herself useful, right? That's what she always did, make herself useful. And as a result, she was always needed and liked. Then again, she had made her passage on his vessel, a very dear one. She wasn't a scullery maid, she was a customer. "My jacket's fearful cold till the wind blows. I'll give ye a halfpenny if you do it first," a fourth pirate said shyly, seeing her hesitate. The others caught on fast. "I'll give ye a grog ration for me pants. I'll give ye a whalebone needle and carve ye a thimble if ye like. Can you make things too? Like a muffler for cold days?" Well, that's better, Wendy decided, I think. Pirates were very transactional and seemed to respect you more if you were as well. In some ways, it was rather a windfall. Who knew what other supplies she would require for her foray into Neverland? In her dreams and stories, there was always just the right shaped stick or rock or key discovered in the last possible moment. But was the real Neverland like that? And of course, the pirates would have to talk to her now. "Take that, she-bows," thought Wendy, very pleased with herself. And I'm going to stop it right there, and I will come back. And I hope everyone has a happy Valentine's Day.